Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we've got John Adams, John and Martin from Interest of the People channel. A lot of you will be familiar with that. They've been doing some great work exposing all the elites and these pedophile rings and how it ties into systemic corruption in government, law enforcement and so on. And John recently released that famous video from the ABC from 1975 and it was taken down on YouTube, but it is still available and pinned on his X account there. Hopefully a lot of you are following John. All the links to do so will be in the description down below. And also today we're going to get into how this ties into the Wood Royal Commission and the other Royal Commission we had into child abuse in Australia in 2013 with this alleged list of prominent people in Australia which has been suppressed. So thanks so much for joining us, John.
Thank you, Alex. I know it's been a couple of months since we last spoke, but it's good to come back.
So it's been a bit of a wild ride for you, I guess, the past 24 hours. So for people that maybe aren't familiar with the story and what's happened, do you want to give them maybe the short version, then we'll get into some more meaty stuff about what happened, how you got your hands on this tape and why you chose to release it?
Sure. Well, yeah, so basically on the 14th of July, 1975, Richard Neville, who was a radio host at the ABC and admitted pedophile, interviewed three other pedophiles and a teenager in the most notorious and most disgusting broadcast in Australian history. And it caused a massive stink at the time. And then the sort of issue sort of died down and everyone sort of moved on. And about 10 years ago, Gerald Henderson from the Sydney Institute wrote about this recording for the Australian newspaper. He wrote a series of columns about it. And then he also wrote, I think, one or two essays for Quadrant magazine. So it just so happened that in 2015, I read one of these articles, and it's always been a curiosity of mine to understand about this tape. So in 2023, I decided to do something about it. I did an FOI request, and they said to me that for audio clips, you got to go to the archives department. So I did, and I said, well, here's the article from the Australian newspaper that refers to this 1975 broadcast. Do you have it? And they said, we do. I said, can I get a copy? And they said, well, sign this form with these legal conditions. And the form was what they call a personal use release form, which basically says that I can only use it for personal viewing in a private setting. It's really to protect the ABC against copyright breach. Not allowed to reproduce it, not allowed to broadcast it, can't use it for commercial purposes, can't share it with a large audience, etc., etc. So I had to sign up to all those conditions. Had to pay some money. They gave me the tape. So that when I first heard the tape, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. It is the most notorious recording ever. And at the time, I only shared it with one person, which was Martin North, and he was completely revolted. And we had the intention at some point of doing something about this. And I basically sat on it for a couple of years as I was focused on other issues. And I said to him, I think it's time to now do a story about it. So about a month ago, we came back on YouTube and we did our first episode and it was titled Australia's Secret Pedophile Tape. And we got over 112,000 views, and that got a lot of people interested in the matter. So now I wanted to share the video with the broader public, because I think that if you're going to tackle the issue of pedophilia, you have to be as open and transparent about the nature of the problem and how extensive the problem is across Australia. So with that view in mind, I went to the ABC and said, would you release me from these conditions? And they said no. So basically I reported that on our first program. I reported that in 2016, Senator Betts asked the ABC to apologize for the pedophile interview, and they refused to apologize. And then in 2018, after receiving more questions from Senator Betts, the ABC said on the record to Parliament, there is no record of the interview. And obviously that was a lie, because they gave it to me in 2023. So you've had this 50-year conspiracy of the ABC pretending that there was nothing big, there was no big deal about the broadcast. They were never going to apologize over it. And then they said that we don't have it. And the reality is that they've been lying about this for 50 years, and this is their deepest, darkest secret. And so now, under federal law, the Minister for Communications, who at the moment is Annika Wells from Queensland, she has the power to direct the ABC to publish content on the ABC's digital platforms if it's in the national interest. So I wrote to her asking her to exercise her powers under federal law, and she basically refused to. And she said that she respects the independence of the ABC, and therefore the ABC said it's not this broadcast doesn't meet the current editorial standards, and therefore they're not going to publish it. So now, while that's true, it's not consistent with current standards. It was also a convenient excuse to conceal the existence of the tape from the public. So having exhausted all legal and political options in front of me, I just basically said to Martin, one thing I should say, Alex, is that it was raised last week in terms of federal parliament. So Senator Malcolm Roberts, who's heard part of the tape, he raised some questions in parliament last week when the ABC was before the Senate Environment and Communications Committee. The ABC basically said they don't know how they denied that they lied. They basically said that they're not sure how the response came up in 2018 that when they said that they didn't have the interview, but obviously they do. And they just basically said that they won't publish it because it doesn't meet current standards, and that was the end of the matter. So I couldn't accept that. So I said to Martin last week, we're going to go ahead and publish it. So basically I put an announcement on X and other social media platforms on Sunday. So we're recording now on Tuesday, and I basically said that at 5 p.m. Monday, the 13th of October, we will go live with the broadcast on YouTube on our Interest of the People channel. And obviously, they got a lot of buzz over a day and a half. And at 4:58, 2 minutes to go before go time, the ABC sends me a text, sends me an email, and basically threatens me with legal action if I was to proceed. And funny enough, Alex, yesterday afternoon, I was actually driving in the car going to pick my daughter up from dance class. So even if I wanted to stop the broadcast with 120 seconds to go, I physically couldn't, because I was basically in the car, and Martin was in the UK walking his dogs in the morning. So it was just going to go. So it went live. It was up on YouTube for 4 hours. It had 23,000 views. Lots of comments, a lot of buzz. A lot of people were completely revolted by it, and then YouTube took it down on the basis that it didn't comply with the child safety policy of YouTube. So now Martin and I had anticipated that something like that would happen. So basically, I uploaded it to X and pinned it to my profile, and it's been up for maybe 15, 16 hours, and it's already had more than 107,000 views. And so we did get some mainstream media coverage with the Daily Mail Australia doing a piece on it yesterday. The Daily Mail will be doing a piece later today with follow-up. And this afternoon, John Ruddock in the New South Wales Parliament gave an address about this whole saga, and so it's obviously been raised in state parliament as well. So there we go. So the tape is out. Tens of thousands of people have now heard the tape. People have downloaded the tape. People have copied the tape. It's now been put up on Rumble. It's been put on BitChute. It's spreading everywhere. The establishment can't keep it a secret anymore. The genie's out. And if the ABC wants to seek an injunction, it's too late. I mean, there's no point in the injunction, because if they were serious about an injunction, Alex, they would have filed in court yesterday morning, and they would have stopped me from going forward. But they haven't. It's out, and if they wanted to get an injunction now, it'd be completely useless, because everyone has it now. So the truth is now out there, and lots and lots of people are disgusted, and people will never look at the ABC the same ever again. And I think that's a good thing, because the elite establishment, particularly in terms of left-wing politics in the 70s, they were pushing pedophilia aggressively hard. And so when we look to the Wood-Royal Commission and the exposure of pedophilia and the police protecting pedophiles, there was a lot of work done in the 90s and the noughties and the 2010s about cleaning up pedophilia in religious institutions, but also in terms of state care, which was a big issue at the time as well. But when it comes to, certain politicians and certain political and cultural figures who are tied to certain issues, when those people push pedophilia, it was they just didn't say a word about it. Richard Neville, who was the host of the program, he passed away in 2016. He received praise from across the community. Mark Scott, who was the managing director of the ABC in 2016, praised Richard Neville when he died. And where did Mark Scott go after finishing at the ABC? He became the secretary of the New South Wales Department of Education. Yeah. So that just shows you the measure of the man, that he praises a pedophile who interviewed pedophiles, who openly praised and tried to normalize the abuse of children. And then when he finished at the ABC, what did he do? He went to actually go run the department that was going to educate the next generation of kids. Yeah. And so we have an insidious, multi-decade pedophile problem in the state of New South Wales, in terms of those who actually partake in the activity, those who cover it up, like the police. And the Wood Royal Commission found that the King's Cross police station and the detectives at King's Cross were notorious for protecting pedophiles for money. And then you have people who are involved in those groups who then go on to have senior positions in New South Wales that have a direct influence over children, like the Department of Education. So It's a very big problem in the state of New South Wales. And I think, Alex, you may have mentioned in the past that I'm from the Wollongong region, and only in the last few months we've had a former MP, state MP, Gareth Ward, the member for Kiama, or the former member for Kiama now. He was convicted on rape charges involving 2 young men. And we have another state MP who's so Gareth's been convicted. He's now facing sentencing, which will happen in a couple of weeks' time. And we have a former MP called Rory Amon, former member for Pittwater. He's been charged with pedophilia, and he's now awaiting trial. So this issue in New South Wales has been happening for a long time, and there were attempts to normalise it in 1975, and it's time that we call the BS out and we publish the tape, and the truth is now out there. And I think by the end of the week we'll have over 1 million hits. And I think the conversation and the debate will change quite significantly going forward, particularly among the ordinary population. So even if the ruling elite and the media and the politicians don't want to talk about this anymore, the fact that the public at large can now hear direct testimony and direct confession from pedophiles, it will forever change the story. Because when you talk about pedophilia, Alex, or if I talk about it, or Senator Heffernan a decade ago, people say conspiracy theory, no evidence, no substance. This is just mudslinging, etc. But now we have a tape where people openly say that they did it. They said how they did it, why they did it, and this is the. I spoke to someone in the last couple of days, Alex, who's been doing a research project about pedophilia. He's making a documentary, and he's spent the last 18 months to 2 years researching this topic in New South Wales and Queensland. He's interviewed over 40 people, 25 on camera, and he said with all of his research and all the interviews he's done, he didn't know about the tape until he saw my first video on YouTube a month ago, and he said it's the most unique piece of media on this topic in the country. And you can interview victims, and you can go through documentary reports like the Wood Royal Commission or the Gillard Royal Commission from 2013, but nothing will substitute an actual confession. And that's what we have in this tape.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it's a problem in New South Wales. I think it's a problem Australia-wide and globally. And I've been coming at this from a slightly different angle with my research the past few years, tying it into these secret societies and these blackmail rings and, the Epstein news, the Diddy stuff. It's rife throughout people in all positions of power and authority. And it's an amazing time to be alive that this is finally all surfacing, coming to light, and tapes like the one you've shared. It's just incredible. It's hard to watch, even with the other research I've done. This stuff hardens you. So, audience beware before watching it. It's difficult to watch. But it is just so important that we expose this, because these are the people that are making the decisions, and people are seeing the direction that our country's heading in, or other countries. And you say, how can these leaders be doing these things that aren't in the interests of the people? And it's because
Exactly.
they tend to be part of these secret societies, these clubs that get put in these positions to be blackmailed or to use this. A lot of them are victims themselves, and this comes from generational trauma and generational bloodlines that are into this sick stuff. So I think all this really ties together with the Wood Royal Commission, with these other inquiries, with the Epstein stuff, that the media and the mainstream seem just desperate to suppress and they don't touch. But it's coming out everywhere now with independent researchers, podcasters, social platforms. So what are your thoughts about how it all sort of ties together there, John? And have you been down a lot of those rabbit holes?
Well, I mean, one thing I can say, Alex, is that while we have now published a historical audio clip from 1975, which goes for 42 minutes, I am planning to do another video soonish talking about the current political pedophile ring that's been operating for the last 15 years. There's been so in the course of the Liberal Party. So, like I said, we have things that are on the record. Gareth Ward being convicted, Rory Amon being charged by police. But there's a lot more that's been happening inside the Liberal Party for 15 years. And in this very room, Alex, I've had people from the Liberal Party over my house telling me all sorts of stories as to what the real situation is in New South Wales politics. And a couple of weeks ago, I went and had a coffee in Sydney with someone very senior in the Liberal Party, and I said, "Well, this is what I've been told. What's your response?" And they basically said it's exactly what they've heard, and they've heard some of this stuff from direct witnesses. So now, when you publish a historical video, a historical audio, there's no real defamation risk because it was a public broadcast, and all of those people, participated in a normally public broadcast, but some of the stuff that I do want to say does carry some defamation risk. So I think I'll have to do a video where I describe the behavior without actually talking about some of the people involved. But earlier today, I actually went about an hour away from where I live and had a meeting with someone at the highest levels of the Liberal Party in New South Wales. And I basically said to them, "This is what I've been told. What's your response?" And that person basically said that they were not shocked, but they hadn't heard some of the specific things that I've been told. So it could well be that there is another video coming up soon, which if we do, it'll be called the Liberal Party Epstein Network. And this is not just a theoretical thing. We're talking about specific people doing specific things in the pursuit of political power. And again, that's the sort of real. And again, I know you're in Tasmania, Alex, and I'm in New South Wales, and I can only talk about the sort of stories I'm hearing, and the stories that I hear are directly from New South Wales, and it's pretty bad.
I've got friends that are social workers that tell me plenty of stuff about high-profile people here. So that's what I'm saying. I think this is a really systemic, widespread problem that is. I'm glad it's finally coming to light. There's coming out too many places for them to suppress this now, so it's only a matter of time till we get to the truth, which I think is amazing. The other thing I want to touch on, John, is I shared with you about Operation Matchbox with you and I think Robbie Barwick and that as well. So I think this goes back even further than what people realise. So a lot of people would have heard of Operation Paperclip, where after the World War, a lot of these Nazi scientists got flown into America and they got put in positions of power in education, universities, NASA, all this type of thing, intelligence agencies in particular. And that's how they really started perpetrating these propaganda programs on the public and getting control of the media to not let this stuff out. And so Operation Matchbox was the same thing that happened in Australia. And a lot of people were shocked to hear that that happened in our country too. And so when you say, how did this kind of all get started, and how, it all ties together, I think, with this one phenomenon that we're seeing with these secret societies that have infiltrated the media, politics, banking, celebrity, all this type of thing. And that's why there's so many witnesses coming forward. And even dozens of Epstein clients now have been on podcasts and this type of thing. Fiona Barrett or Barnett is probably Australia's most famous one. And there's the documentary Candy Girl you can watch on YouTube about her, what she went through in Australia and that type of thing. So, yeah, are you familiar with some of that stuff, John? And, were you surprised with some of those ties as well when I shared that stuff with you?
So look at what I'll say, Alex, is that I haven't gone deep into those areas. I know you've done some deep research there, so I haven't gone as deep as you have. So I'm aware of those. Obviously, I've heard of Fiona Barnett. I'm aware of her allegations. Obviously, I think the last time we were on, we talked about Operation Matchbox. So I'm broadly aware of those topics. But I would agree that there is a very insidious, corrupt political culture that's playing out in real time, and there's so much pressure on people to keep their mouth shut. Even one thing I can say on the record, Alex, is that about 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, there was a meeting of the University of Wollongong Liberal Club. And so I attended that meeting, given that I used to be a member of the club back 20 years ago. And the motion before the meeting was to strip Gareth Ward of his life membership. And at that meeting, people had openly said there were more victims. So the prosecution in the case presented 2 victims that were prepared to testify in court, but there are more. And the reason why those other people never went to testify before the courts is because of intimidation, threats. If you speak out, you'll never have a future in the Liberal Party ever again. We won't forget if you betray us, etc., etc. And that's there's a cone of silence that happens in certain organizations, whether it's like the Catholic Church or the Liberal Party or elsewhere. And that's why these behaviors are allowed to continue and fester, because people are afraid, people are intimidated. And even in the last 24 hours, Alex, people have said to me that they respect my courage. I was like, well, I don't think I'm that courageous. I'm just not going to succumb to the ABC's intimidation and threats. And if they want to file in court and give me a legal bill, then I'm prepared to face that. But I think their threats were largely bluff. And so far, I haven't been served any court documents. But we'll see. In relation to the ABC, if they do decide to take any action, I think it's going to just amplify the story, and it's going to backfire in their face. So we'll have to see. But no, there's a lot of people who are easily able to be controlled through intimidation tactics, and that's why these things get to remain hidden behind the shadows for a long time.
Yeah, well, I commend your courage as well to release it, John. And as you say, 100,000 views. There's so many people that can upload to any platform now. So if they ever do come after one person, there's just way too many people awake to this now. And it's just a matter of it kind of going mainstream and being forced to go mainstream, because we're already kind of seeing a lot of politicians and these people in positions of power that done bad things. They can't walk down the street anymore. There's too many people that have woken up to this stuff. So this is where I think we're really reaching a turning point. But do you want to maybe touch on Bill Heffernan? Because he, as you said, we've got good people like Malcolm Roberts, and there are some that are trying to stick up for the genuine interests of the people. But if you haven't seen this clip, I might post it down below for people. But Bill Heffernan talking about this legend, this list of 28 high-profile people in Australia, including one former Prime Minister. But one of the things he talks about in that clip was part of the inquiry didn't actually look into the legal system itself. And I think some of the victims that came forward named, judges and that type of thing as well. So if the people that are in charge of punishing it and investigating it are in on this too, that is another big reason there hasn't been justice on a lot of these things. And yes, we've seen some low-level people go down, but it hasn't been any of the high-profile people. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, okay, so in relation to the Wood Royal Commission, the Royal Commission was established in May 1994. In the second half of 1994, there was a Labor MP who stood up in Parliament and said that the police were protecting pedophiles, and that was a very controversial speech. So as a result of those allegations, the terms of reference of the Wood Royal Commission were expanded to examine the question of pedophilia in New South Wales and what role did police have. And as a result of that, in 1997, there was a specific report about pedophilia in New South Wales, and it's over 600 pages. So one of the chapters in the report that I've read talks about case studies, and it talked about a certain number of individuals. Now, one of the people that was mentioned was a Supreme Court judge, and I strongly suspect the only reason why he was named in the report is because Frank Arena in 1997 gave a very controversial speech in which she named specific people who had been either mentioned in the Woodrow Commission proceedings or had testified before the Woodrow Commission. And that speech basically led to certain disclosures, and so that's why one of these judges was in the report, because after that speech he committed suicide. So and obviously he was well known to be a pedophile and he was guilty. So the allegation is with Heffernan is that while the Woodrow Commission inquiry into pedophilia mentioned some politicians and some judges, like a few here and there was a lot more that they could have looked into, but they decided not to look into certain areas. And the so-called list of 28 names. So the issue here is that Heffernan said it's a police document. So someone provided a list of 28 names to the police. That's how it became a feature of the Woodrow Commission. Now, who's the author of the list? We don't know. Now, in the Woodrow Commission inquiry into pedophilia, they do refer to a person called Colin Frisk and someone called, I think, RS5 or RK5, who's an unnamed solicitor. And these two people continued to make allegations that senior judges and politicians were involved in this activity. That sort of those allegations were not fully explored. And obviously Heffernan said it's time to really get into the guts of the legal profession to see how deep the corruption goes. And to this day, it's been one of those professions that continues to be untouched. Now, with respect to the Woodrow Commission, now there's an academic from the Australian National University who did a biography about a former Wollongong Lord Mayor Frank Arkell, who was a pedophile. And I just had some correspondence with this academic in the last 2 weeks. And he said that he was able to examine the testimony before the Woodrow Commission. He had to sign a number of legal documents to have access, and he was given access. But the police files, which would have contained a lot of these allegations and possibly evidence, that's been sealed for a long time. And so the police file, he didn't have access to the police files, but he was able to reconstruct some of the files based on the witness testimony. So I think there's a lot the Woodrow Commission didn't look at, and that was the criticism that Heffernan was suggesting. But I'm doing some additional work on that, and we'll see if we can raise some additional points in state parliament to see if we can bring more transparency about what did the Woodrow Commission look at, what did they not look at, and is it time to go back into those areas that have been untouched, so we can really expose the evil that's happening in certain professions like the law.
Yeah, there was another group of lawyers I found last night during my research that have been doing a lot of these cases and had a brilliant website. Have you heard of any other lawyers that are specialising in this type of thing for other victims to go to? Because I will link that down below as well.
No. The thing is, I've come across a documentary maker, as I said, who has interviewed a whole host of these victims, both in New South Wales and Queensland. But I haven't come across specific lawyers who have dedicated their sort of legal career to exposing this sort of behaviour. So, I mean, if there are current solicitors that are practicing, Alex, that you want to put me in contact with, I'm happy to have those conversations. But it's not something that I've been able to come across yet.
It was kelsolawyers.com. I'll put that link below. And they look like they've been specialising in this type of stuff out of maybe Queensland and Western Australia from their website just here. But yeah, I didn't go fully into it, but I was surprised at a lot of the cases and stories, and they had a good website, so I'll link that down below as well. But where to from here, John? I'd love to get in touch with that documentary maker as well in future, maybe after we get off the recording, to touch base with him. But what's next for you with all of this stuff?
Well, I mean, so the immediate issue at play is that there'll be another article by the Daily Mail. I think I'll do another update to my YouTube channel because, as I said, that the video was taken down after 4 hours. Now, I've launched an appeal through YouTube. I suspect that YouTube won't adhere to my appeal and it will remain banned, but everyone can go onto X and watch it there. So, I mean, I think we're just going to continue with the topic. If the ABC files papers in court and serves me legal papers, I'll deal with it when that time comes. But I think it's been a big 24 hours. I think the fallout will continue throughout the week, and we'll obviously see if any other media picks it up. But I think for lots of Australians who had suspicions about some of this stuff, given the Heffernan speech and the Woodrow Commission, the Gillard Royal Commission, the Weinstein, the Epstein stories, the Jimmy Saviles in the UK. So there's been plenty of material swirling about for decades in the Western world, and now we have one of the most explicit confessions on record, and people can now hear it with their own ears. So I think this whole topic now is going to be turbocharged, and hopefully it changes the political conversation. Because if everyone's talking about one topic and the politicians don't want to talk about it, at some point they'll be forced to start focusing on the issues that the public want. And I know that pedophilia and corruption are two of the hottest topics in the current political environment, and a lot of politicians don't want to go into these areas, but at some point we're going to force them to, and hopefully we get some real change. And that's part of the purpose, Alex. I mean, if you want real change, you have to show people how bad the situation is, and nothing comes from hiding the truth, even if the truth is ugly, even if the truth is confronting. In my view, even though that a number of people said they were horrified by the recording and they could only hear a few minutes before they had to turn it off, I think it's important that people get fully acclimatized to how deep and how rotten and how evil the situation is. Because until we fully grasp the seriousness of the situation, you're not going to have the groundswell of support for major reform, and that's the real objective: transparency, get everyone fully awake to what's going on, and hopefully we can, between you and me and others, drive political change in the in terms of the political environment, and I guess we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, we haven't heard the end of this at all. There's, even those financial transactions tying Aussie politicians to the Clinton Foundation and the Epstein network and all this. There's so much more that's got to come out to really wake the public up. And if we can't protect our children, and if people that are running the country and running our institutions are doing this, then people really need to wake up to help protect the kids.
Look, I was just going to say, Alex. I mean, look, so I completely agree. I think there's a lot of still unanswered questions, and one of the questions that I just genuinely don't know the answer to is obviously there's footage of Paul Keating's daughter walking out of a building with Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. So you've got the daughter of a former Australian Prime Minister with Epstein in New York, and it's like, well, how did that connection ever happen? I mean, the media has never fully explained what that relationship was, how it started, who connected Paul Keating to Epstein, and again, I think there's, that clip alone raises a whole series of questions as to, well, what's really going on at the top of society in this country versus pedophiles in other countries, I think there's plenty of material for researchers to continue to dig, and where does it take us in the end? I don't know, but I guess one step at a time, and let's see where the evidence takes us.
Fantastic, John. We'll keep up the good work, guys. All those links to follow John and all that will be down below, and we'll have to have you back on again in future, John. So good luck with it all.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.